The rain had been falling steadily since dusk, turning the long driveway into a silver ribbon that reflected the mansion's lights. Steven Seagal's car rolled to a stop beneath the covered entrance, the engine humming softly as he sat for a moment, tired from a long day. He was about to step out when something caught his eye beyond the glow of the porch. Near the edge of the garden, where the lights barely reached, someone was sitting on the cold stone steps. Steven frowned. Through the curtain of rain, he saw a small figure hunched forward, shoulders rounded as if trying to disappear. It was Maria, the housemaid who had worked quietly in his home for years. She was soaked to the bone, her thin jacket clinging to her frame. In her hands was a small plastic container, tilted carefully so the rain wouldn't wash its contents away. She ate slowly, methodically, as if each bite mattered more than the last. Steven opened the car door and stepped out, the rain instantly tapping against his coat. He stood still, watching. Something about the scene felt deeply wrong. Why was she out there? The house was warm. The kitchen was open. The dining area was empty. Yet Maria sat in the rain, chewing silently, eyes fixed on the ground. She didn't look around. She didn't complain. She didn't rush. It was as if she had accepted this moment as normal. Steven felt a tightening in his chest. He had always known Maria as polite, efficient, almost invisible in the way people in service often learn to be. She greeted everyone with a soft smile, never asked for anything, never caused trouble. But seeing her now, alone, drenched, eating outside like she didn't belong, stirred something uncomfortable inside him. Thunder rolled in the distance. Maria paused mid-bite, glancing toward the house for just a second, fear flickering across her face. When she realized no one was watching, she lowered her gaze again and continued eating, shielding the container with her body. Steven's confusion turned into concern. This wasn't about rules or schedules. This was about something deeper, something unspoken. He took a slow step forward, then stopped. Whatever was happening here, he knew one thing for certain: this was not a coincidence. And whatever truth lay behind that quiet, rain-soaked moment was about to change everything he thought he knew about the people living under his own roof. What Steven Seagal was about to discover would break his heart. Steven didn't approach her right away. Instead, he remained under the shelter of the porch, the rain forming a steady curtain between him and the scene unfolding just a few yards away. Years of discipline had taught him the value of patience, and something told him that interrupting this moment too quickly might make Maria retreat even further into herself. She ate slowly, carefully, as though she was counting each bite. When the rain grew heavier, she shifted her body to protect the small container in her hands, angling it away from the water. Her fingers trembled, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. Steven noticed how thin she looked, how her shoulders seemed to carry more weight than her small frame should have to bear. Every now and then, she would pause and glance toward the house, just a quick look, then immediately lower her head again, as if afraid of being seen. That look said more than words ever could. It wasn't defiance. It was fear. Fear mixed with shame. Steven felt a knot form in his stomach. He replayed the image in his mind, a woman who worked in a warm, well-lit home choosing, or being forced, to eat outside in the rain. It didn't make sense. Not unless there was a reason she hadn't spoken about. A rule. A fear. Or a silent suffering she believed she had to endure alone. The rain soaked through her shoes. Steven saw her wince as cold water pooled around her feet, yet she didn't move. She didn't complain. She didn't hurry. It was as if she believed she didn't deserve more than this. A car passed on the road outside the gate, its headlights briefly illuminating her face. In that brief flash, Steven saw it clearly, the exhaustion in her eyes, the hollow look of someone running on empty. This wasn't just about hunger. It was about dignity. Steven clenched his jaw. He thought about how many times people walked past quiet pain without noticing. How often suffering hid behind politeness and silence. Maria had been in his home every day, and yet this moment had remained invisible, until now. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the ground. Maria's hands began to shake more noticeably. She wrapped her arms around herself between bites, trying to hold on to warmth that simply wasn't there. Steven took a step forward, then stopped again. He knew that whatever he was about to do could not be done carelessly. One wrong word, one harsh tone, and she might shut down completely. People who suffer quietly often fear being seen more than being cold or hungry. He took a deep breath, his decision forming slowly but firmly. Before stepping into the rain, Steven paused and looked toward the camera mounted near the entrance, its small red light blinking. Somewhere, someone might one day see this moment. But right now, it wasn't about cameras. It wasn't about status. It wasn't about power. It was about understanding why a woman who belonged inside was sitting alone in the rain, eating as if she had nowhere else to go. And Stephen knew, deep down, that the answer was going to hurt. Stephen stepped out from under the porch and into the rain. The cold drops hit his shoulders instantly, but he didn't slow down. His footsteps were quiet against the wet stone, yet Maria sensed movement. She froze mid-bite. Her eyes widened as she looked up and saw him standing there. For a split second, panic crossed her face. She scrambled to her feet, nearly dropping the food container. I'm sorry, sir, she said quickly, bowing her head. I didn't mean to, please don't be angry. Stephen raised his hands gently. It's okay, he said calmly. You're not in trouble. But Maria didn't seem to hear him. Her words tumbled out in a rush. I'll clean everything. I didn't make a mess. I'll go somewhere else. Maria, Stephen interrupted softly. Please. Sit. She hesitated, rain running down her face like tears. Slowly, she lowered herself back onto the step, her hands trembling as she clutched the container. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, as if looking at him might make things worse. Stephen crouched a few feet away, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. Why are you eating out here? He asked, his voice low and steady. Silence. The rain filled the space between them. Maria swallowed hard, shaking her head. It's nothing, sir. I'm fine. Stephen studied her carefully. You're soaking wet. It's cold. And you're hiding, he said gently. That doesn't look like fine. Her shoulders tightened. I didn't want to bother anyone, she whispered. Bother? Stephen repeated, surprised. She nodded slightly. I don't like to be seen eating inside. The words hung heavy in the air. Stephen felt a sharp ache in his chest. Who told you that you couldn't eat inside? Maria's breathing grew uneven. She hugged the container closer to herself, knuckles turning white. Please, she said softly. I don't want problems. Stephen leaned forward slightly. I'm not here to cause problems, he said. I want to understand. She shook her head again, tears mixing with the rain now. If I say too much, I could lose my job. That sentence hit harder than any accusation could have. Stephen fell silent, giving her space. He could see the fear in her posture, the way she made herself smaller, the way she spoke as if apologizing for existing. I don't want special treatment, she added quickly. This is easier. Easier than being warm? Stephen asked quietly. She didn't answer. The rain softened slightly, but the weight of the moment only grew heavier. Stephen realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. A habit formed from being told, directly or indirectly, that she didn't belong. He straightened slowly, his expression controlled but deeply troubled. Maria, he said firmly yet kindly, no one in this house should feel like they don't deserve warmth or dignity. She finally looked up at him then, eyes wide with uncertainty. Stephen knew this conversation was only the beginning. Whatever truth Maria was holding back, it was bigger than the rain, bigger than a single meal. And he was determined to hear it, no matter how painful it might be. If you were in Stephen's place, would you walk away, or step in to help? Comment help if you believe kindness matters. Maria sat in silence for a long moment, the rain easing into a light drizzle around them. Her hands trembled as she set the container beside her, the food now forgotten. Stephen didn't rush her. He waited, knowing that some truths only come out when the speaker feels safe enough to let them go. I wasn't told directly, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. No one ever said, you're not allowed. Stephen frowned slightly. Then why do you believe you can't eat inside? Maria swallowed hard. Because of the looks. The silence. The way people stop talking when I enter the room. She forced a small, sad smile. You learn very quickly where you belong. Stephen felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He had heard those words before, spoken by people who had learned to make themselves invisible just to survive. She took a shaky breath and continued. When I first started working here, I would eat in the kitchen after finishing my duties. One day, someone walked in and stared at me like I had done something wrong. After that, no one said anything, but the feeling stayed. Stephen's jaw tightened. So you stopped? She nodded. I didn't want trouble. I didn't want to be seen as ungrateful. Rain dripped from the edge of the step. Maria pulled her jacket tighter around herself. Most of my salary goes back home, she added quietly. My family depends on it. I can't risk losing this job. Stephen looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized how much strength it must take to carry that fear every single day. Sometimes, she said, her voice cracking, I wait until everyone is busy or asleep. Sometimes I eat outside. Sometimes I don't eat at all. The words hit him like a blow. Stephen stared at the wet ground, anger rising beneath his calm exterior, not at Maria, but at the invisible system that had taught her this was acceptable. No one should have to earn the right to eat, he said firmly. Maria shook her head quickly. Please don't be upset, she said. This is my choice. I don't want to cause problems. That's the problem, Stephen replied gently. You think dignity causes problems. Her eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to keep my head down and do my work. Stephen nodded slowly. And in doing that, you carried something no one should have to carry alone. He could see now that this wasn't just about one house or one moment. It was about people everywhere who suffer quietly because speaking up feels too dangerous. Maria wiped her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed. I didn't think anyone would notice. Stephen met her gaze. I noticed, he said. And now that I have, I won't pretend I didn't. The rain had nearly stopped, but the truth had fully come out, and it weighed heavier than the storm ever could. Stephen thought the truth had already revealed itself, but Maria's silence told him there was more. Much more. She sat with her shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the wet ground, as if deciding whether it was safe to continue. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind a heavy stillness that pressed in on them. Is there anything else you're not telling me? Stephen asked gently. Maria's lips trembled. She shook her head at first, then stopped herself. Slowly, she nodded. I didn't want you to know, she said. Because once you know, I might lose everything. Stephen's heart sank. You won't lose your job for telling the truth, he said firmly. She let out a shaky breath. My daughter is sick. The words came out broken, barely audible. Stephen's expression changed instantly. How sick? Maria swallowed hard. She has a heart condition. She needs medicine every month. Sometimes treatment. Her hands twisted together in her lap. That's why I send almost all my money home. Stephen listened, motionless. There are days when I eat very little, she continued. Not because I want to. Because if I choose between food for myself or medicine for her, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Stephen felt a sharp ache behind his eyes. I sleep here because it saves rent, Maria said. I don't complain. I don't get sick days. I don't ask for anything. I just work. Her voice cracked. I thought if I stayed invisible, I'd be safe. Stephen closed his eyes briefly. All his wealth, all his strength, all his years of training, and yet he hadn't seen this. Not until now. How long has she been sick? He asked. 3 years, Maria whispered. 3 years of fear. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of quiet suffering. And eating outside. Stephen asked softly. She nodded. So I don't look like I'm taking more than I deserve. That sentence broke something inside him. No one, Stephen said slowly, his voice steady but heavy, has to suffer to deserve a job. And no mother should have to starve to save her child. Tears streamed freely down Maria's face now. I didn't ask for pity, she said desperately. I just wanted to survive. Stephen looked at her, not as an employer, not as a celebrity, but as a human being seeing another human at her limit. You don't need pity, he said. You need support. He stood up slowly, offering her his hand. She hesitated, then took it. In that moment, Stephen realized something painful and undeniable. Real hardship doesn't announce itself. It hides behind smiles, politeness, and silence. And once you truly see it, you can never unsee it. Stephen helped Maria to her feet and guided her toward the house. She hesitated at the door, her body stiff with uncertainty, as if crossing that threshold required permission she had never been given. It's okay, Stephen said gently. You're welcome here. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them instantly. Maria shivered as the cold left her body, and Stephen noticed just how exhausted she looked under the bright lights. He led her to the kitchen table and placed a clean towel in her hands. Sit, he said. Not as an order, but as care. Maria sat slowly, still unsure, her eyes darting around as if expecting someone to stop her. Stephen poured her a cup of hot tea and placed it in front of her. You don't have to rush, he said. You don't have to hide. For a moment, Maria simply stared at the steam rising from the cup. Then her hands began to shake as she wrapped them around it. Stephen pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Here's what's going to happen, he said calmly. You will eat your meals inside. You will have a proper place to rest. And you will never feel like you don't belong in this house again. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Sir, I don't want special treatment, she said quickly. I don't want anyone to be upset because of me. Stephen shook his head. This isn't special treatment. This is basic respect. She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. And your daughter, Stephen continued. You won't face that alone anymore. Maria looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, Stephen said steadily, her medical care will be taken care of. No more choosing between food and medicine. The words seemed unreal to her. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling freely now. I can't accept that, she whispered. You can, Stephen replied. Because this isn't charity. It's responsibility. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent my life learning about strength. Real strength isn't intimidation. It's protection. Maria nodded through her tears. Stephen stood and gestured toward the window, where the last drops of rain slid down the glass. That rain out there, he said, should never have been your dinner table. She let out a quiet, broken sob. Stephen placed a reassuring hand on the table. From today on, things change. Do you believe kindness is the truest form of strength? Type respect in the comments if you agree. The change didn't happen all at once, but it was immediate enough to be felt. The next morning, Maria woke up in a small guest room instead of the storage space she had quietly used for years. Clean sheets, a warm blanket, and sunlight filtering through the curtains made her pause in disbelief. For the first time in a long while, she didn't wake up with fear pressing on her chest. Downstairs, Stephen was already awake. He didn't make a show of his decision. There were no speeches, no announcements, no need to explain himself to anyone. He simply acted. Maria ate breakfast at the kitchen table that day. Not rushed. Not hidden. Just human. Over the following weeks, real changes followed. Stephen arranged proper medical support for Maria's daughter, ensuring she received consistent treatment without Maria having to beg, borrow, or sacrifice her own health. For the first time in years, Maria slept through the night without worrying about the next hospital bill. But what stayed with Stephen most wasn't the gratitude, it was the realization. How close had this suffering been, all along? He began paying closer attention. Not just to Maria, but to everyone around him. He noticed how easily people in service roles were overlooked. How politeness often masked pain. How silence was mistaken for contentment. Maria changed too, but not in the way people expect. She didn't become louder or demanding. She simply stood straighter. Her smile became real, not forced. Her eyes no longer carried the constant fear of being one mistake away from disaster. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maria thanked Stephen quietly. You didn't just help me, she said. You saw me. Stephen nodded. Everyone deserves that. The story didn't spread because Stephen wanted credit. There were no interviews. No social posts. No headlines. If people eventually learned about it, it was because moments like these have a way of surfacing, not through noise, but through impact. Stephen reflected on how easily the rain could have hidden that night forever. One missed glance. One rushed moment. And Maria would have continued eating in silence, believing that suffering was simply part of her place in the world. But it wasn't. The lesson stayed with him. Real compassion isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It notices what others ignore and acts without needing applause. Somewhere far away, Maria's daughter laughed again. Somewhere closer, a woman finally felt safe in a place she worked. And somewhere inside Stephen, a quiet truth settled in. Strength isn't measured by power or fame. It's measured by how you treat the people who think they don't matter. If this story touched your heart, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more emotional, inspiring stories like this.